Hi, I'm Lonnie Schoenfeld, and I want to welcome you here to a very special interview with Renee Francey and Chuck Francey. But before I introduce you to Renee and Chuck, I do want to mention one thing. Deanna and Tiffany with Divine Design, I called them and I said, I would like to do this interview. What would you charge me to do it? And they told me what their price was, and I said, okay, well, let me tell you what I want to do. It's an interview with Renee Francey, and they said, oh, that makes a difference. We're not going to charge you anything. So they loaded up all their equipment. They have a very busy, growing company, Divine Designs, and they're doing this because they love Renee as much as they do. So I want to thank them for this. It's a very special gift that they've given to us, and thank you to that. Now, having said that, this interview will have no sponsors, no commercials, no crawls across the bottom of the screen with advertising. This is just about Renee and about Chuck, and that's what we're going to do. So I want to bring Renee Francey in. How are you?
I'm doing good, thank you.
Thank you for being here, and Chuck, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for asking us.
Well, it's our honor to have you here. Thank you so much. Now, I was a little surprised because you contacted me last night, and we already had this set up to do, and you said, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be able to make it, but I found out that they're putting my port in tomorrow morning, and they're going to put me under. But I still think I'll be okay to do it. And I was like, I don't know. But here you are. So how are you feeling right now?
I'm still numb a little bit, but I'm starting to get a little bit of feeling back. It feels weird. It's kind of tugging, because of where they had to put it. But I mean, I'm tired, I'm sleepy, I'm ready to take a nap. But
well, just a few minutes and then you go and take a nap.
In between, obviously.
We'll talk, you now, we'll nudge you when it's time, right? Well, there are going to be a lot of people who watch this who don't know you, and that's hard to believe because all over Hunt County, everybody knows who you are, but there will be people in other areas that don't. So I want to bring them up to speed about who you are, who Chuck is, where you're from. I know it's another planet. Let's make believe you're an Earthling.
Okay.
And we'll go from there. So tell us about Renee. Where did you weren't born in Greenville. So tell us about where you were born and how you got here.
Well, my parents they met in Fort Worth, but my great-grandparents were from Greenville. And my great-grandparents raised 8 children here. They were Quattlebones. And then my grandmother raised 8 children here. And then they moved off to Fort Worth. And that's where my parents met. And I was born in White Settlement in 1966. I'm an old chick. I just turned 54.
That's young, but go ahead.
Anyway, so I was born in White Settlement, and we moved so many times. Like I told you earlier, it was over 50 times in my life. But we moved to Greenville when I was 70. When I was 72, we moved to Greenville. In 1972, we moved to Greenville, and I went to Bowie Elementary. I went to 1st and 2nd grade there. I had Mrs. Calhoun was my 1st grade teacher. I remember her. And I don't remember her 2nd grade teacher. She didn't like me too much, so I don't remember her. But then we moved out to California for a little while, and then we moved to the Rio Grande Valley, and it just on and on. I've been all over Texas.
So when you told me that you and your family had moved 50 times or more.
At least, yeah.
And you initially think, well, it's a military family now. But
yeah.
No. They just chased you out.
They did.
And you kept moving.
I did.
So you were here, and then you came back again.
Right.
When was that?
That was in 98, and I went to work for Aerobic Water, and my brother and sister-in-law owned the company at the time. And I worked for them, and then my ex-husband and I had moved out to Florida, and we lived there for 3 years. We divorced out there, and I stayed for a couple of years, and then my mom got sick. She had a stroke. And I just felt the need to come back and be here with her and the family. So my daughter and I packed up and we came back. And then I met this wonderful person.
Well, we'll get to that. What year did you move
That
back?
was in 2003.
2003.
2003. I've been here ever since.
Being the person that you are,
Yeah.
involved in everything, you immediately started getting involved
I did.
in community. What organizations were you in?
The first organization was Altrusa, and Mary Stanfield was a friend of mine, and she sponsored me to join Altrusa. And I really enjoyed the community part of it and volunteering, and I got into graphic design, and I started working with their newsletter and their book, their membership book. So that was kind of my deal every year, and that led me to my career, pretty much.
Now, you were approached by some people that wanted you to run for city politics.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Well, that was in 2012. I had later joined Lions Club, and Steve Reed was the president of American National Bank, and he approached me outside of the Lions Club meeting, and he said, "You should think about running for city council." And I'm like, "Nope, not interested." And then I had other people, the late Judge John Horn approached me, and Sue Ann Harding approached me, and Bobby Stovall, and they all said that I would probably do a good job on there. So
you ran.
I did. I talked to Chuck and talked to my boss, that was Lyndon Stromberg, and talked about what it would entail if I did go. I would, have some time off work. And he said, "Well, we need some good people on the council." I'm like, "Well, thanks." So I decided to run, and I won. And it was a hard 3 years, but I did the best that I could and put my blood, sweat, and tears into it. And that was it. I ran again, but I was beat by Brent Money.
Well, there's community involvement,
Yeah.
and then there's community involvement, and you are on the latter of those. So you've done some great work here in this town. Now, Chuck, how did the two of you meet? Where was it? What happened? Tell me that story.
You want to know for real?
Yes, I do.
Well, actually, she found me. After I went through my divorce, I put an ad out on Yahoo Personal,
Okay.
and I had a plaid shirt on. And looked like a dork.
He was a nerd,
Okay.
but he looked safe.
Yeah, that's what she said. She said, she said, "I got tired of being in the third wheel." And she said, "I just want to find somebody." And she said, "I come across your picture and you look like you were safe." 17 years later, so.
He's still safe.
He's still safe. He's still safe. So who asked who to marry? Because usually it's the man who does that.
Well,
That's the sweetest proposal.
actually what I did is I had talked to Brittany.
My daughter.
I know Brittany.
So I talked to Brittany first, and I asked her, since her dad wasn't alive. And she said yes. And
You talked to my mom.
then I talked to her mom. And then I arranged it for everybody to be over at our house on July 4th. And I proposed to her right in front of all her family, right there in the living room. So she was happy.
The reason I asked about which one of you asked is because you are such an assertive person, and I thought if it was going to be anybody, it might have just been you.
It wasn't leap year.
So now you're together. You've been married since 2004, so it's been 17 years.
Right.
When is 18?
It's actually we'll be together 17 years, December 1st.
Okay,
So
you're coming up on it.
coming up
How
on
about that? That's great. So the reason we're here is not necessarily to talk about the proposal and the wedding, although that sounds like it would be a pretty good story. But you were going about your life here in Greenville. You were doing what you do. And there was a reason you decided to go to the doctor. Something was not right. So what was going on?
I was having nausea in the middle of the night, and then my stomach was cramping, almost like heartburn, but I was feeling like I was hungry when I would just eat or when I hadn't eaten. It was just a weird sensation. And since I had insurance, I decided I was going to go to see a gastro doctor instead of going to a regular doctor. I went to see Dr. Khatib here, and he did an endoscopy, and he didn't like what he saw, but he thought it was heartburn. So we ordered an MRI. Again, he didn't like what he saw. So he sent me to Dallas to see another doctor. It was Dr. Burdick. And he did an endoscopy with fine needle aspiration. He took out, he's the one that did the tissue biopsy. Well, at first, he looked at it and he said, it looks like an ulcer and your diaphragm or your stomach was.
Well, the opening of the stomach that goes into the intestines was too small. It was at 9 centimeters.
And he dilated
And
it.
he dilated it up to 15.
But he said he didn't see anything that looked like cancer. Yeah. And then that was like on a Thursday or something night.
Thursday.
And then on Tuesday evening, it was like 11 or something at night, I looked at my phone and I had a voicemail where we live. We moved to Campbell. I don't always get my phone calls, but I'll get the voice messages. They'll just pop up when it gets to a signal, an area that has a signal. It popped up. It was about 11:30 at night. And I listened to it and he said, Miss Francey, this is Dr. Burdick. I'm really sorry I missed you. Well, they don't usually call at 8:30 at night, which is when he called, to say, I'm sorry I missed you, or to tell you you had a good test or whatever. My mom was diagnosed with colon cancer in 2008. And I'd gone through pretty much the same thing, the late at night phone calls. Dr. Kober called and said there was something on her liver, when we were doing the scan on her kidneys or whatever it was. And I just had a feeling then, and I told him, I said, what if? And then I said, but I'm not gonna worry about it because it is what it is. So the next morning I get up to go to work and I get in my truck and I turn it on and Mercy Me song, Even If, comes on. And I just turned it up and I just played it over and over again because I just had a feeling that that's what was fixing to be said to me. So I called him and he said, you have gastric cancer? And I'm like, okay, what do we do now? And he said, well, do you want to go to Greenville for therapy? And I said, what would you do? What would you have me do? And he said, personally, I would prefer you go see a gastric specialist, oncologist. And I said, I'm at your mercy. Whatever you think is good for me is what I need to do. So he referred me to Dr. Scott Paulson, best thing that could have ever happened. And Dr. Ward was the surgeon. So I wrote the words cancer down, stomach cancer. And I got up and I went and showed JoBeth. I'm sitting next to her, the cubes, and then I showed Darren, he's sitting behind me, and they're both just like bright-eyed. And then I go in my boss's office, Karen, and I sit down. No, I handed her the note. And she's like, no way. And I sit down and I feel a little overwhelmed for just a few seconds. And she looked at me and she said, if anybody can beat this, you can. And then we had a personal conversation and she pumped me up like a football game. And I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna fight this. This is not gonna take me. And I just had this overwhelming feeling of peace. And that was it. And then I went downstairs and I said to him, do you want me to tell you over the phone or do you want to see me in person?
And Chuck?
And I told her, because as soon as, when somebody asks you a question like that, and I told her, go ahead and tell me. And
she told you, what's the first thoughts going through your mind?
Well, at first, the first thing I said is crap. Then I thought to myself, well, we'll just leave God's hands and do what we can. What else could we do? It's like, okay, what's the next step? Where do we go from here? And, don't think it didn't choke me up inside, because it did. Because I've had family members that have fought cancer and have lost it. And I have no friends that have fought cancer and have survived. But there again, I know how much of a fighter she is.
She is a fighter.
She is. And she's been fighting the same fight, and I'm proud of her, very proud of her.
So Renee, when did you start treatments the first time?
Well, the ironic part of this whole thing is I was able to get into the oncologist's office the next day, the 10th. He had cancellation. So they couldn't get in touch with me. They got in touch with him. I was leaving to go to the drugstore to get an ice pack for my knee because I had a torn meniscus and it was hurting. And so I had just left the office to go get that. And he calls me and he says, hey, they can get you in. And so I said, okay, let's go. I called my boss. I said, hey, I'm going to Dallas. And she said, see you tomorrow. And well, actually it was Friday, so whatever she said. So I went in and talked to him and we got our plan together. And then we saw the surgeon the next week. And then they put the other port that I had in the next week. So within 3 weeks, I was port implanted and on chemo, started chemo. But the sad part is that a year ago today, which was the Tuesday after the port was put in and the chemo, I found out I had a hole in my lung. When they put the port in, there was a little cut in the lung and I had to go in and they put it in a chest tube. Oh, that was the worst pain ever. Chuck was ready to slap someone.
Well, you are one of the most courageous people I've ever met in my life, not because you're such a fighter, and that's part of it, but because you're so open and you want to share everything that you're going through with your family, your friends, and even people you don't know. So we all were on that journey with you. We weren't there, we weren't you and Chuck, but we followed everything that was going on. You had so many friends on Facebook, so many friends in real life that would come out and see you, that would come to your house and pray with you in a prayer circle. You went through all that stuff. You had so much support. My question is, when that support, when those people, when Facebook is gone, and you're there in the hospital undergoing a procedure, where do you go in your head?
Music. I sing in my head. I have songs that just, and God is there and I can feel the presence. And these are happy tears right now because I've just never felt so much peace. And I've never felt closer to God than I do at this moment. I was telling a guy I work with the other day, Monday, he was leaving. And he turned around and he goes, hey, Renee, how you doing? I said, I'm doing great. How you doing? So he came back and sat down with me. And I started telling him about Jesus and how there's one set of footprints because he's carrying me. There was a time that I couldn't have said that because I even felt like, get your voice back, girl. I had someone tell me that God loved you and I said, no, he doesn't. He doesn't love me. It's not possible because of the things that I went through as a kid. No kid should have to go through. I was a victim of sexual abuse and other things. My dad was an alcoholic. My dad would never touch me. So don't think that he was the one who would have killed someone if he would have known. But there was just a lot of heartache and a lot of heartbreak in my life. And God got me through it. And it took a long time for me to be able to say those words and to realize that he got me through it to the next step. And I've been able to share some of that with other women, the sexual abuse, because it is very common. There's so many of us out there and we don't talk about it because we're ashamed and we feel that somehow it was our responsibility or our fault. In reality, it wasn't. It's because there's sick people out there and we are in their path. But when I realized that God loved me and he is allowing me to go through what I'm going through to honor him, to bring him glory, to bring people closer to him. There are people that don't believe in God, and I'm sorry for them. There are people that don't believe in love too. So you can't argue with it. You know, they either do or they don't. They either feel it or they don't. It is a feeling. It is something that gets inside of you and it brings on this peace. It's like walking on the beach. It's like hearing the ocean, the waves, and there's just not a better feeling, Lonnie, than that peace and knowing that God is with you. When I found out this time that I had cancer, it was a struggle. And I went and found a Joyce Meyer sermon. And it's funny because I went on YouTube and I found this sermon. And then in there, she was talking about a book. And it was called Do It Afraid. I think it was Do It Afraid, or Facing Fear or something like that. And I'm thinking, I bet she has a sermon on that. So I turned that one off and I went to that one, and it was exactly what I needed to hear. Do It Afraid, or something fear. I wish I could remember. But I listened to that about 8 times that day, just over and over again. Facing fear, doing it afraid. And it wasn't that I was afraid of dying, because I'm not. Because I believe that I will go to heaven. I believe that there's a place, and I'm going to see the people that I've never met that I want to meet, my grandparents, and I get to see my mom and dad again, my grandmother. And my thing is, I don't want to leave Chuck alone. I don't want to leave Gavin, my grandson, Maddie, my granddaughter, and Brittany, my daughter, and my nieces and nephews and sisters and brother. But I started thinking about it, and I actually come to the conclusion that it's almost kind of arrogant of me to think like I'm thinking, because God is going to blanket them just like He's blanketing me, and He's going to take care of them. And they'll be sad and there'll be a hole, but He's going to blanket them. And everybody will be okay. And then as long as they believe and accept that Jesus Christ is their Lord and Savior, we'll see each other again.
So you went through the journey the first time, and it was tough because you shared what you were going through, and Chuck shared a lot of it on social media and on videos of you sitting up in the bed and taking that walk around the hospital floor. All of those things you shared with everybody who loves you and wanted to see what you were experiencing. And then when it was all over, you got a test, and it showed that you were clear.
And the port taken out and everything.
When was the test that showed that you were clear? April of this year.
Yes.
And so you're back to doing what you do because you beat it. You're finished with it. It's done. You're ready to move on.
Right.
You faced it, and you faced it down, and you beat it. What caused you to decide to go back to a doctor recently?
He told me to. He said, we're going to keep her every 3 months or whatever. We're going to do scans just to make sure, because it was an aggressive cancer. On June 1st, I had an MRI done, and when I went back for the results, he said that there was something in my liver that they were concerned about, and there was also a lymph node. I had forgotten all about the lymph node because the spot in the liver, that's what I heard, and that's all I focused on. Well, it ended up being something called focal fatty infiltration, and it's very common with people who have been on chemo. But I'm thinking that was around April. It was right after COVID, because I was talking to, I did the podcast anyway, because I called him and told him, anyway. So I'd forgotten about the lymph node, and then he told me he wanted me to come back in August. Was it August or September? September, and do another MRI. So let's check it in 3 months and see where we are. It went from the size of a pea to the size of a quarter in the 3 months. So we ordered a PET scan, and we did the PET scan. And Thursday, 2 weeks ago today, that's when I was supposed to get the phone call to let me know if it was or wasn't cancer. I knew it was. This whole time, I could just feel it. It was in my gut. It was churning. I could just feel that it was cancer. Not from a feeling, but from a feeling, And I told my task lead, I said, I want to go home. I said, the anxiety, it's getting to me. That was that day. I'd listened to Joyce over and over and over again. And I said, I just want my husband to hug me. Just want him to hold me. That's all I want. I just want to go home so he can hold me. And so I called him, and he was on his way home. And then my grandson was home, and I called him and I said, hey, what are you doing? Cleaning the house. I said, can I come see you? And he said, yeah. I said, well, I need a hug from my favorite grandson. So I went over there, and he met me at the door. He gave me the biggest hug. He's 14. gave me the biggest hug, and then the granddaughter came around, and then we had a group hug, and I stayed there for a couple of minutes, and then I went home, and he gave me the biggest, warmest hug. And then I have 2 horses that were given to me, and I basically rescued them. And the one, the brown one, blackish brown one, she's not wild, but she's not completely broke. And I decided I'm gonna work with her. It's therapy. So I put the saddle on her and I lunged her around in the corral. And that time Chuck came out with his phone. He said, it's the oncologist's office. So I get on the phone. She goes, Miss Francey, she said, the doctor hasn't had a chance to look at your scan yet. And he said he'd get with you tomorrow. And I said, no, I cannot wait another day. I need an answer tonight. Even if you're just going to tell me what the results are, I don't care. I can't function. I need to know. And she said, okay. And then she called me back and she said, he told me I could tell you that it is cancer. And I said, okay. That's what I need to hear. I knew it was.
So your thoughts at that moment, are you angry because you just had a test a few months before that said you're clear. You're ready to move on. You're not. What about you, Chuck? How do you feel at that moment?
When they told us it was cancer.
Are you angry?
No, I wasn't. You know, it's like 2.0, let's go.
It was disappointing.
It is. It is
disappointing.
Because, you know, she's been through so much and she has fought so hard. And just to come back and go through this over again. But there again, the doctor did tell us when all this started. He said, this type of cancer that she has is very aggressive. And, you know, there again, I keep going back, we can put it all in God's hands and that's all we can do and hope for the best. And if it comes back, then okay, what do we got to do this time? And it's just like when we went and visited with the oncologist, he asked me, he said, how aggressive do you want me to get? And I said, I want you to be as aggressive as you can be within reason. And he told us, he said, okay, he said, I have my marching orders, but he says, I will not torture her. And then she asked me, she said, how hard do you want me to fight? And I told her, I said, I want you to fight like you got something to live for. I said, you have me and the kids. She said, but what if I get to that point that I just can't do it anymore? And I said, when you get to that point, that's when you stop. I'm not going to ask her to do something that she doesn't need to do.
So what's the treatment going forward? Where do you go from here?
Well, let me finish telling you that she told me that it was cancer, and she told me he would talk to me that night. And I said, no, just tell him, make me an appointment. I'll talk to him then so we get a game plan. And he ended up calling me anyway. We talked for 20 minutes. That's when we started with the game plan. We met with him at 11 o'clock the next morning, and he told me he wanted a different approach. We're gonna do a pill. So I gotta do 3 pills 2 times a day for 14 days, and then I get a week off. The first day that I start the pill, I'm also doing a liquid type, intravenous type chemo. It's not oxyplan, which is something that I had before. It's totally different. I can't think of the words. But he wants to try to avoid the neuropathy because my fingers are still numb from 6 months ago, because that's how hard they push you. And so we went to the appointment, and I just point blank asked him if I was going to die. And he said, we're all going to die, unfortunately. And I said, you know what I mean? And he said, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but I don't think we can beat this, cure this. And I said, that's what I need to know. He said, I need you to live your life. I need you to move forward. I need you to make plans to get your life in order. But it is aggressive. It is stage 4. But stage 4 is not a death sentence. People think stage 4, oh, she's dying. No, it's in my lymphatic system. It's moved. Most of my stomach is gone now, so it's moved into the lymphatic system, which it was there, but it's moved on. And where it is very dangerous because it's near blood vessels, major blood vessels. It's right near the liver. is either in my living or in my dying, and whatever he sees fit to do is what's going to happen. But he wants me to fight, or he wouldn't give me the strength.
I know that you're going to keep us up to date. You'll keep everybody up
Yeah,
to date. I know you will
absolutely.
on all of your progress and treatments and how things are going, and I'm sure we'll see you around town and doing what you do. We're going to wrap this up for today. I have a question for both of you. Renee, finish this sentence for me. My biggest fear is...
Any fears? I'm not even afraid of that anymore. I was worried about him moving forward. But I told him that if he didn't, that everything I'm going through would be in vain. Because God has a plan for him and his sorrow after it's all done.
Chuck, one question for you. Finish this sentence for me. I feel the most helpless when...
Right now. It's a man's job to protect his wife and his family. And right now, I can't do anything about it except for be there for her, support her. That's where I feel hopeless.
I'm going to ask you both to make me a promise. A year from today, come back and we'll do this again. Is that a deal?
It's a deal.
Deal.
Thanks so much for being here. I'm staying away from you. Thank you so much for being here, and thanks so much for sharing your story with everybody who loves you. And now there's going to be so many more people who didn't know you that love you both now. So thank you both for coming in.
Well, thank you. And if people want to follow us, they can on Facebook.
Tell them how. Team Renee on Facebook.
On Facebook. And then also the shirt.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And wherever the camera is, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. We will keep you up to date. Team Renee on Facebook. You'll follow all of Renee and Chuck's experiences, and we'll talk to you again. Thank you.